Hi to all. So this is my nonfiction November challenge TBR. And this is such a simple challenge for me because I actually read more nonfiction than I do fiction, and had already got a couple books at the library before I had even seen anything about this challenge, and it corresponds in perfectly. So one of those is for the new. One of them has to be new. It doesn't necessarily have to be new as in it just came out. It could be new to you, although I think it's supposed to be leaning more towards, you know, more of a newer release. But either way, I got that covered. So I had already checked out Avid Reader at the library. It came out in 2016, and it didn't even matter actually what the book was about. As soon as I saw Avid Reader, I knew that I was getting this book. But actually, it is very interesting. I'm about a quarter of the way through already. And Robert here is actually a former editor of The New Yorker. And he has been an avid reader since he was a kid. And this basically tells just different books and his life going through different publishing companies that he had worked for, and just stories about certain books that he actually got published. Said, yes, we're publishing this book, and just and the people he worked with, just very interesting, and even actually has photos, which I always love. I mean, here's one of him with Lauren Bacall. So anyway, just, you know, being a avid reader, you have to read this book. And anything on publishing I always find very interesting anyway. One of the other books that you must read, there's 5, if I haven't mentioned, there's 5 different categories that you need to read to complete this challenge in November. One of them is controversial. So I have chosen Wild Things, and this is basically, it's acts of mischief in children's literature. And just, this goes through what's controversial about this part. Part of the book has to do with books that have been banned, or actually even had parts of it rewritten in later printings, that type of thing. Books you never really thought about, even down to, you know, I grew up in the 80s, so I read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. So there was even issues with that book, if you can believe it. And this just tells some of the history of books that, 1, were controversial, and 2, just behind the scenes of some of the children's literature, about the authors, maybe even some celebrities that have written children's books. So anything that I can read about books, I'm there. So I'd really like to know if anybody has ever even read this and their opinion on, because some of the stuff they bring out, especially the controversial parts, I'm thinking, okay, well, I see why some people are maybe having an issue with this, but if this is the way, it's kind of like the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. There were evidently some issues on certain parts. And you know, she is actually talking about how things were in her day. So this is how people talked, this is how they acted, these are things that happened to them. And just my personal opinion, and I know I'm going to get probably bad stuff on this, but if you leave it out, or if you change the author's wording, are you not, in a way, taking part of this nonfiction book and turning it into fiction? Because that is not the truth. That is not the way it was. That is not what was said. So it's not that, I know it's so hard that you want to word it correctly, but you don't want to change history either. So I get it, because there's books that, you know, my high schoolers have had to read in prep school, and I'm like, okay, I don't agree with this. I don't want you reading this right now, because it might have some sexual content or that thing in it. So I get as a parent why you're kind of like, ugh. But, you know, it's just, when it's things that have to do with, that's such just a tough subject, and that's a vlog all in itself. And anyway, so my choice for controversial is Wild Things. Okay. Another category is important. And for that, I have chosen Conversation, A History of a Declining Art by Stephen Miller. Now, this one I did not get at the library. This is from one of my Friends of the Library book hauls, where I got over 40 books for $12. If you haven't seen either one this year's or last year's vlog from that library sale, check that out, because, yeah, just a wide variety of books that I got. So, anyway, important. Obviously, conversation is important. And I haven't started this book. I really don't know what I'm going to find when I read it. But I understand the history of a declining art. If you think about it, between emails and Snapchat and texts, I mean, the art of just being able to talk to people face to face is declining. So, and when was this book written? So, I mean, that's just it's an important part of society's life. At 2006 is when this was written. So even from 2006 to now, 10 years, it's declined even more since this book was written. So I'm very curious to see how the author here, what he can, maybe if he predicts where things are going and where they've came from. So I think this is definitely an important topic and should fit that challenge very well. Another category is fascinating. And I love Charleston, South Carolina. I find the history of that place, the architecture, the artwork, the people, all of it. I find it fascinating. And actually, my husband and I, some time ago, had actually made a trip without the kids to Charleston for the weekend. And I had to have this book. I saw it, I'm like, I have to have this book. Very livid, because I am a book collector. I don't dog ear my books. Oops, Rosie was in it. And I take care of I don't even open them up all the way when I read them. And my husband put his coffee cup on there. Can y'all see that? That rim right there, can y'all see that? So he ruined the cover of my book with stupid coffee mug. And the last one is interesting, something that you find interesting. And I have always thought that philosophy, I mean, how can that not be interesting? Because there's so many opinions and roads to go on. But every time I find the meaning of life, they change it. By Daniel Klein. And this is just going to be a short little quick read, but I have already started it, and it's already funny. It's got just little bits of humor in it, but it's also got history in it, and actually has, you know, there's wisdom of some great philosophers in there and some quotes, and I love quotes. So that is for my interesting. So I have my 5 books that I will be reading this month. I am going to try not to touch any of the other books that I was already previously reading, because I do read at least 3 books at a time, and I've been known to read up to like 7 at a time. But that is because people are like, how can you read that many? Because you're going to get all the characters mixed up. Well, not if you read mostly nonfiction anyway. And I mean, I'm always reading a fiction book or 2, but it's going to be something so totally different. There's no way to get characters mixed up or anything like that. So this is my nonfiction November TBR, and I would love to hear what you guys have selected, or even if you've read any of these books. And I know they're kind of off the wall. I'm not really one that ends up reading the, you know, latest books put out. I end up, seems like, reading them later than everybody else reads them because my TBR is so long anyway. But so until the next page.